with you all. And the fact that I'm in South Africa, and one of the nuances here is load shedding. So whilst I get to speak tonight at 8 p.m. my time, load shedding kicks in again. So whilst I won't be available for questions and answers, please, at the end of my presentation, take a screenshot of my contact details. I would be delighted for you to connect with me with your comments or your questions or any ideas. So over to me sharing my screen now with you. There we go. So our topic tonight is active listening. Active listening is this ability, it is a confidence, and it's a willingness to engage with another human being, to listen deeply. I would even go so far as to say to encounter another human being in active listening is such a huge demonstration of respect and humanizing a person. So this, I'm afraid, is what it looks like when we're not being heard. Unhappiness, sadness, frustration, anxiety, aggression, despair, despondency, depression. It can even turn into neurosis, a sense of hopelessness, a sense of helplessness. And nobody that we love and care for. So with the attitude, the mindset, which is very much part of my being, is Dr. Viktor Frankl's work. Better people, not in spite of, but because of the very circumstances that they find themselves in. And we have a chance in everyday circumstances to become that better person, simply because of the people we encounter, the people who have a request for us to listen to them. Listening is way deeper than hearing. Listening is about not having in the back of our mind, not even that sometimes, very often in the forefront of our mind, not having our next question, our next comment, our next answer. It's about listening to this human being who is in front of us. How do I engage in active listening? Definitely not through our own senses, but through the senses of the other, and then encountering them from where they're at. So listening gives us an opportunity as a listener to think about what we're hearing, to think, to learn from what we are hearing, to give up this connotation. Yes, I know that. No. As soon as we go into that space, yes, I know that, we go into a fixed mindset that is closed off from what is actually happening. So this process of listening allows us to think, allows us to learn, allows us to interact in the way of speaking, in the way of asking questions, in the way of taking the conversation further. Here are some active listening skills. Active listening skills requires us paying attention. And here's a big one. Do not interrupt. Interruption creates a very much of a a stop in the communication flow. Very useful is to summarize. Holding eye contact allows the two people to know that they are connected. Show interest. When we show interest, we absorb. When something is not too clear, wait for an appropriate time, therefore not an interruption, to request clarification. Your partner will appreciate such a question because then they know that you are listening. And use positive body language. The gestures that we show our talking partner shows them that we're engaged. So just like a summary, paraphrasing into your own words back to the person that you're listening to is very helpful for clarification. Also for being engaged as an active listener. Withhold judgment. Each person's unique conditioning and mindset, and we all have it. Show sympathy, show empathy, show compassion appropriately. Repeat some of the key phrases, again, like the summary and like the paraphrasing. That helps us to stay engaged, connected ourselves, focused ourselves, and allows the other person to know that we are actively listening. But again, I say to you, it has to be appropriately positioned into the conversation. And then share some of your own experience, share some of your own ideas, and possibly even advice if asked for it. 12 active listening skills, something that can be utilized very well in our everyday conversations. So what I do love about this slide is, I don't know if you've done masterminding, but this depicts masterminding to me, where a person and a person come to a conversation, and because the two of them are engaged in active listening, having an encounter with each other, putting out ideas without the judgment, just as it is, just put out the ideas, that what happens is that there are light bulb moments that go off for both parties, simply because the two parties have come into this dynamic motion, emotion, this dynamic of sharing ideas, mindset, conditioning, sharing ways of going forward. It's dynamic, it's alive, it's vital, it's energetic. And because of that, the bulbs pop, pop, pop. Oh my gosh, that is such a good idea. That is such a good idea. No judgment allows for free flow of energy, positive energy. So this listening, this way of approaching a conversation, this way of approaching questions, answers, this way of engaging and encountering another, oh yes, it will reveal each person's conditioning, the way we've been conditioned in our minds, in our hearts, in our beings, in our soul. That conditioning all comes onto us through our lives of being children with parents, children at school, parents ourselves, being conditioned by governments and churches, etc., the media. The conditioning releases, shows itself. Our mindset shows ourselves in our conversations, our listening. That's why listening is so interesting, because you can pick up these nuances that aren't in your own conditioning, possibly, but are in somebody else's. And of course, this all leads to the way we behave, the way we take action, and the results that we get. It is such a gift to be able to listen to another human being with the attitude of finding meaning in what the other person is saying, finding purpose for a way forward, finding fulfillment for having had purpose and meaning in a conversation. And two people coming together with an attitude of learning from each other, of listening deeply from each other. I believe that's an ingredient for ensued happiness. When we get to understand another human being from this perspective, we attract to ourselves ways of finding happiness in our own lives. These are gifts. People's conversations with us are gifts because we get to listen deeply, we get to learn from them. So a little process for you, always with me. Anybody who follows my work will know that I do this on a regular, everyday basis. Always, always, always. I've got dozens of these journals. I work in journals all day long. Journals help me think. Journals help me clarify ideas. So I write down the points. And my suggestion is use color pens. Have fun with it. Identify your questions, identify your process, identify your ideas that pop by using different colors, so that when you reflect back on what you have journaled, it comes very easily back to you. Don't interrupt people unnecessarily. Have appropriate timing for questions. And if you're bursting with a question and afraid that you're going to forget it, write it down. People's thinking needs to flow. It was Nancy Klein, whose book, Time to Think, identified this interruption part so clearly. Nancy Klein understood that when you ask a question, it takes the brain of the other person time to formulate, one, the question, but formulate, two, the answer. Give them time to think so that when they respond, it's true. That encounter is all about understanding. That encounter requires time of the listener, requires time of the speaker, so that both of them can come to a common place. Mutual respect is what I call it. If the current situation is not conducive to a quality time listening period, my suggestion is just stop it. Stop it and say, let's set another time for this. I want to give you my best. I want to hear of you at your best. If this is not conducive for right now, then set a new time and a new space. Mutual respect is what we're after, particularly like my own work. I work with trauma of all kinds, anything that blocks the mindset, anything that blocks action, anything that blocks potential. And the encounter needs to be set up in such a way that it's a full-on, safe, sacred, confidential space. And if it isn't those things, a new appointment needs to be set. Don't you love these faces? I love these faces. Oh my gracious, it says everything, doesn't it? Happiness says everything. And when we're listened to, when we are listened to, we feel important. We feel a part of the whole. We feel included and loved. Included and loved. And is that not what we want for the people we encounter? So I am Dr. Barbara Johnson. I'm known as the People Developer. Please take a screenshot of this. I would love to hear back from you. I would love to be able to encounter time with you and listen deeply with you. And I thank you so much for having me on this program tonight. Thank you, Gansu, and thank you, audience. I'm looking forward to